In the small town of Briarwood, where secrets hide behind friendly smiles, Sarah Miller's routine life at the century-old bank begins to unravel when an enraged old woman storms into the bank, her mysterious curse unleashing a chilling darkness. Whispers in empty rooms, shadows that move, and a vengeance fueled by voodoo that threatens to consume them all. In the quiet town of Briarwood, California, where gentle breezes and friendly smiles define daily life, Sarah Miller worked as a customer service representative at the century-old Briarwood Bank. The bank's classic stone facade and creaky wooden floors carried a charm that belied its mundane operations. Sarah, accustomed to the predictable rhythm of her job, found comfort in the routine, until a stormy morning shattered her sense of normalcy. Rain pounded the windows as a frail, elderly woman in a tattered raincoat shuffled through the heavy oak doors, clutching a large handbag. Her presence seemed to darken the room as if the storm had followed her inside. The woman approached Sarah's desk with a scowl, her eyes glinting with barely contained rage. "You people," she spat, her voice trembling with venom, "have forgotten what matters. Your service is a disgrace." Sarah, trained to handle complaints with professionalism, forced a smile despite the woman's hostility. "I'm sorry, ma'am, if something's wrong. How can I assist you?" she asked politely. The woman's expression only hardened. "You've disappointed so many," she hissed. "You'll pay for it." Without another word, she turned and stormed out, leaving Sarah stunned. As the door slammed shut, an unsettling chill settled over the bank. The air felt heavier, as if charged with an invisible weight. Sarah tried to shake off the encounter, but the woman's words echoed in her mind like a curse. Her colleagues, busy with their tasks, seemed oblivious, but Sarah couldn't ignore the strange tension lingering in the room. It was as if the bank itself had absorbed the woman's anger. That evening, as Sarah walked home through the rain-soaked streets, she felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Glancing over her shoulder, she caught a fleeting glimpse of a shadowed figure in the distance, cloaked in a familiar tattered raincoat. Her heart raced, but when she turned fully, the street was empty. The unease followed her home, burrowing into her thoughts. She locked her doors, but the feeling of being watched persisted, gnawing at her nerves. The next night, while working late to balance accounts, Sarah heard faint footsteps echoing from the bank's upper floor. The building was supposed to be empty, yet the sounds were unmistakable, slow, deliberate steps creaking on the old wood. She froze, her pen hovering over the ledger. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself, but the footsteps grew louder, closer. Her legs trembled as she climbed the stairs to investigate, only to find the hallway dark and silent. Back at her desk, the air grew colder and the lights flickered briefly. Sarah's colleagues began whispering about their own strange experiences, shadows flitting in corners, whispers heard in empty rooms. No one could pinpoint the source, but the bank felt alive with a malevolent energy. Machines malfunctioned without explanation, computers froze and cash registers jammed mid-transaction. Customers, too, seemed on edge, some glancing nervously toward the exits as if sensing an unseen threat. Sarah couldn't shake the image of the old woman's furious eyes. Her warning, "You'll pay for it," replayed in her mind, each repetition more ominous. At home, her sleep was plagued by restless dreams of a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with hollow eyes. She woke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, convinced someone had been in her room. The curtains swayed slightly, though the windows were closed. By the third day, the bank's atmosphere had grown oppressive. Even James Carter, a seasoned employee with over 20 years at Briarwood, seemed rattled. He pulled Sarah aside, his face pale. "Something's wrong here, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "I've heard footsteps upstairs like someone's pacing. It's not just the wind." His eyes darted toward the ceiling as if expecting the sounds to return. Sarah's stomach churned. The bank, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. She noticed small details she'd overlooked before, a faint, musty smell in the air like damp earth, a cold spot near the vault that made her skin crawl. Her colleagues' stories grew stranger, objects moving slightly, papers vanishing, and a persistent feeling of being watched. The bank's history, once a point of pride, now seemed to hide a darker truth. As Sarah locked up that night, she glanced at the rain-streaked windows and saw a reflection that wasn't hers, a pale, gaunt face staring back. She gasped and spun around, but no one was there. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she hurried to her car, the woman's words echoing louder in her mind. Whatever was happening, it was tied to that mysterious stranger. The town of Briarwood, with its quaint charm, no longer felt safe. Sarah sensed that the bank held secrets far older and more sinister than she could imagine. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. Something dark had been awakened, and it was only the beginning. The strange occurrences at Briarwood Bank intensified, transforming the once familiar space into a labyrinth of dread. Machines continued to fail inexplicably, printers jammed, screens flickered with static, and the vault's lock occasionally refused to open. Sarah's co-workers whispered about the mounting oddities, their voices hushed as if afraid to stir whatever lurked in the shadows. The bank's warm, oak-paneled interior now felt claustrophobic, its high ceilings looming like a judgment. One evening as Sarah worked late, a loud thud echoed from the break room. She rushed to investigate, her pulse racing, only to find the door ajar and the room empty. A single coffee mug lay shattered on the floor, its pieces scattered as if thrown with force. Her hands shook as she swept up the fragments, the silence around her deafening. The air felt thick, pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. The next morning Jenna, a new teller, confided in Sarah with wide, frightened eyes. "I heard someone whispering my name last night," she said, her voice trembling. "I was alone in the teller booth, but it felt so close, like they were right behind me." Sarah's stomach twisted. She hadn't shared her own experiences, yet Jenna's story mirrored her own growing fear. The bank was no longer just a workplace, it was a stage for something sinister. Customers began avoiding the bank, their visits brief and uneasy. Some claimed the air felt wrong, while others hurried out, muttering about a chill that seeped into their bones. Sarah noticed their glances toward the corners as if they, too, saw the fleeting shadows that plagued her. The bank's once bustling lobby grew quieter, the silence amplifying every creak and groan of the old building. That night, alone in her office, Sarah's computer screen flickered violently before displaying a single word, "Pay." She gasped, her chair scraping backward as she stared at the screen. The word vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her doubting her own eyes. Her hands trembled as she rebooted the system, but the memory of that word burned into her mind, a warning she couldn't ignore. The footsteps upstairs grew bolder, no longer confined to the night. During a quiet afternoon, Sarah heard them directly above her desk, slow, heavy, deliberate. She glanced at her co-workers, but they seemed oblivious, their heads bowed over paperwork. She climbed the stairs, her heart pounding, only to find the upper floor empty. Yet the air was colder here, thick with the scent of damp earth, like an open grave. Sarah's dreams grew darker, filled with visions of the old woman's face. Her eyes hollow, her mouth twisted into a cruel smile. In one nightmare, the woman stood in the bank's vault, surrounded by writhing shadows that whispered Sarah's name. She woke gasping, her sheets damp with sweat, the echo of those whispers lingering in her ears. Sleep became a battleground each night, leaving her more drained. James approached her again, his face haggard. "I found something in the storage room," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Old ledgers from the 1980s, marked with strange symbols. He showed her a photocopy of a page covered in cryptic markings, like runes drawn in blood. Sarah's skin prickled. The symbols felt alive, pulsing with an energy she couldn't explain. The bank's atmosphere grew heavier, as if the building itself were breathing. Lights dimmed without cause, and the temperature plummeted in random spots. Sarah's co-workers began calling in sick, their excuses thin and their voices shaky. Those who remained moved cautiously, their eyes darting to the shadows. The bank felt like a living entity, its walls watching, waiting. One night, as Sarah locked the vault, she felt a cold breath on her neck. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Her flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to dance just beyond her vision. A low, guttural laugh echoed from the darkness, sending her sprinting to the exit. The laughter followed her, fading only when she reached her car. Sarah's fear was no longer abstract. It was a tangible force wrapping around her like a noose. She couldn't shake the feeling that the old woman's curse was tightening its grip, targeting her specifically. The bank was no longer a place of work, it was a prison, and she was running out of time to escape its grasp. Desperate for answers, Sarah visited the Briarwood Library, seeking Mr. Hamilton, the town's historian and librarian. The old man's eyes widened as she recounted her encounter with the mysterious woman. "That sounds like Martha Dupree," he said, his voice trembling. "She was no ordinary woman. She practiced voodoo, and her wrath was legendary." He led Sarah to a dusty archive room, where yellowed newspaper clippings detailed Martha's tragic past. Martha Dupree had lived in Briarwood decades ago, a recluse shunned by the townsfolk. Her family's land was seized by the bank in a shady foreclosure, leaving them destitute. Martha, enraged, had vowed revenge, her knowledge of voodoo fueling her threats. She came to the bank, cursing its name, Mr. Hamilton said. People laughed, but strange things started happening. Accidents, illnesses, disappearances. Sarah's blood ran cold. The parallels to her own experiences were undeniable. Back at the bank, the air grew thicker, the oppressive energy almost suffocating. Sarah's co-workers whispered about their own encounters. Flickering lights, cold spots, and voices calling their names. Jenna, now visibly shaken, refused to work alone, claiming the whispers had grown louder, more insistent. Sarah noticed her own reflection in the bank's windows looked distorted, her eyes hollow as if the curse were draining her life. That night, Sarah found a small leather-bound book tucked behind a filing cabinet. Its pages were filled with strange symbols and incantations, written in a shaky hand. A folded note slipped out, bearing the name Martha Dupree. Sarah's hands trembled as she read a passage describing a voodoo curse that bound its victims to suffering until justice was served. The words seemed to pulse, burning her fingertips. The bank's disturbances escalated. Papers vanished, only to reappear in locked drawers. The vault door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Sarah heard the old woman's voice again, a chilling whisper, "You'll pay for their sins." The words echoed in her skull, each syllable dripping with malice. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, her heart racing as the lights flickered violently. Sarah's health began to deteriorate. Her skin grew pale, her hands shook, and a constant fatigue weighed her down. She felt the curse's grip tightening, sapping her strength. Her dreams were now vivid nightmares. Martha standing over her, chanting in a language she couldn't understand, her eyes glowing with unnatural light. Sarah woke screaming, her voice hoarse, the room unnaturally cold. Determined to fight back, Sarah returned to the library, poring over books on voodoo. She found references to protective rituals, complex ceremonies requiring rare ingredients and precise incantations. The rituals were dangerous, warning of dire consequences if performed incorrectly. Sarah's resolve wavered, but the thought of Martha's curse consuming her pushed her forward. At the bank, she discovered a hidden compartment in the basement, containing a wooden box etched with voodoo symbols. Inside were black candles, a small doll pierced with pins, and a vial of dark liquid that smelled of decay. Sarah's stomach churned. These were tools of Martha's curse, left to fester in the bank's foundation. The realization hit her. The bank was a focal point for Martha's vengeance. Elliot, the enigmatic homeless man who lingered near the bank, caught Sarah's eye as she left that night. His weathered face held a knowing look. "You're in deep, girl," he said, his voice low. "Martha's power is real, but it can be broken, if you're willing to pay the price." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but his offer was her only hope. Sarah's fear mingled with determination. She couldn't ignore the artifacts or Elliot's cryptic warning. The bank was a battleground and Martha's curse was growing stronger. Sarah knew she had to act, but the cost of confronting such dark magic was unclear, and terrifying. The next day the bank felt like a tomb. The air was stale, the lights dim, and every sound was amplified, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of a flickering bulb. Sarah's co-workers avoided her, their faces pale, as if sensing she was at the heart of the storm. She clutched the voodoo book, its weight a reminder of the fight ahead. As night fell, Sarah stood alone in the bank's lobby, the silence oppressive. A faint tapping began, growing louder, closer, until it seemed to come from within the walls. She whispered a prayer, her voice trembling, knowing that whatever came next would test her courage and her sanity. Sarah's resolve hardened as she prepared to confront Martha's curse. Elliot agreed to meet her at the bank after hours, bringing a worn satchel filled with strange herbs and talismans. His eyes, sharp despite his ragged appearance, scanned the lobby warily. "This place is soaked in her anger," he said, lighting a sage bundle that filled the air with acrid smoke. Sarah's heart pounded. She trusted Elliot, but his cryptic demeanor unnerved her. He explained the ritual, a counter-curse to banish Martha's spirit, requiring a circle of protection, offerings of salt and blood, and an incantation to summon guardian spirits. "It's dangerous," Elliot warned. "Martha's power is tied to this bank and she won't let go easily." Sarah nodded, her mouth dry, knowing there was no turning back. The basement, where Martha's artifacts were found, would be the ritual's focal point. They descended into the bank's underbelly, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was a maze of dusty crates and forgotten files, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. Elliot traced a circle in salt on the floor, muttering words in a language Sarah didn't recognize. She placed the voodoo doll and black candles from Martha's box at the circle's center, her hands trembling as the air thickened. As Elliot began the incantation, the temperature plummeted. Sarah's breath fogged in the dim light, and the bulb flickered violently. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to watch them. Elliot's voice grew louder, his words sharp and rhythmic, but Sarah felt a pressure building in her chest, as if the curse were fighting back. A low moan echoed through the basement, followed by the sound of scraping like nails on wood. Sarah's eyes darted to the shadows where a figure began to form. Martha, her face pale and twisted, her eyes burning with rage. "You dare defy me?" her voice boomed, shaking the walls. Elliot didn't flinch, continuing the chant, but Sarah's legs buckled under the weight of Martha's presence. The ritual required a blood offering, Sarah's blood as the curse had latched onto her. Elliot handed her a small knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. She hesitated, her hand shaking, but the sight of Martha's advancing shadow spurred her on. She sliced her palm, wincing as blood dripped onto the salt circle, which glowed faintly, pulsing with energy. Martha's scream filled the basement, a sound that clawed at Sarah's mind. The shadows writhed, lashing out like tendrils, knocking over crates and shattering glass. Elliot shouted for Sarah to hold the circle, his voice strained. She clutched the voodoo book, reciting the incantation with him, her voice trembling but determined. The air crackled with energy, the circle glowing brighter. Suddenly the basement door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The bulb exploded, plunging them into darkness save for the faint glow of the salt circle. Martha's form grew larger, her eyes boring into Sarah's soul. "You cannot undo what's done," she hissed, her voice a chorus of whispers. Sarah's vision blurred, her strength fading, but she clung to the ritual, knowing it was their only chance. Elliot tossed herbs into the circle, their scent sharp and bitter. The shadows recoiled, but Martha's presence grew stronger, her laughter echoing like breaking glass. Sarah's blood continued to drip, each drop sizzling as it hit the salt. The circle's glow intensified, pushing back the darkness, but Sarah felt her life force draining, as if the ritual were pulling from her soul. A sudden wind tore through the basement, extinguishing the candles. Martha's form lunged forward, her skeletal hands reaching for Sarah. Elliot shouted a final incantation, his voice raw, and the circle flared with blinding light. Martha's scream pierced the air, her form dissolving into a cloud of ash. The basement fell silent, the air still and heavy. Sarah collapsed, her vision swimming. Elliot caught her, his face grim. "It's not over," he whispered. "The curse is weakened, but she's still here." Sarah's heart sank. The ritual had cost her blood and strength, but Martha's spirit lingered, biding its time. The bank remained a battleground, and Sarah was far from free. As they climbed the stairs, the bank felt different, less oppressive but still heavy with an unseen presence. Sarah's palm throbbed, her body weak, but her resolve burned brighter. She had faced Martha and survived, but the war was far from won. The curse's roots ran deep, and she would need to dig deeper to end it. Sarah's recovery was slow, her body weakened by the ritual. The bank's atmosphere remained tense, though the disturbances lessened slightly. No more footsteps, no more whispers. Yet the air felt charged, as if Martha's spirit were watching, waiting for a misstep. Sarah's co-workers noticed the change in her, pale, drawn, her eyes haunted, but they avoided asking questions, fearing the answers. Determined to uncover the bank's secrets, Sarah returned to the basement, armed with a flashlight and the voodoo book. The wooden box still sat in the hidden compartment, its contents untouched. She found a faded ledger among the artifacts, its pages detailing transactions from the 1980s. One entry caught her eye, the foreclosure of the Dupree family's land, marked with the same symbols as the voodoo book. The ledger revealed a grim truth. The bank had colluded with local officials to seize Martha's land under false pretenses, leaving her family destitute. Sarah's stomach churned as she read notes about bribes and forged documents. The bank's pristine reputation was a lie, built on greed and betrayal. Martha's curse wasn't just vengeance, it was justice twisted by dark magic. Sarah shared her findings with Elliot, who nodded gravely. "Martha's tied to this place because of that betrayal," he said. "To break the curse you need to make it right, expose the truth." Sarah hesitated. Revealing the bank's corruption could cost her job, her reputation, even her safety. But the alternative, living under Martha's curse, was unthinkable. She began digging deeper, scouring the bank's archives for more evidence. Late at night, she found a locked filing cabinet in the manager's office, its key long lost. With a crowbar, she pried it open, revealing a trove of documents, letters, contracts, and memos detailing the bank's illicit dealings. Each page was a nail in the coffin of Briarwood's idyllic facade. The disturbances returned with a vengeance. As Sarah sorted through the documents, the lights flickered and a low growl filled the room. Shadows coiled around her, their edges sharp like blades. She clutched the voodoo book, whispering protective words, but the shadows pressed closer, their cold touch burning her skin. Martha's voice echoed, "You can't undo the past." Sarah fled to the lobby, her arms full of documents. The bank felt alive, its walls pulsing with anger. A chandelier swayed above her, its crystals clinking ominously. She stumbled, dropping papers, and saw Martha's face in the shadows, her eyes glowing with fury. "You'll join me in suffering," the spirit hissed, her voice ablaze against Sarah's mind. Elliot met her outside, his face grim as he scanned the documents. "This is enough to expose them," he said. "But Martha won't let you walk away easily." He handed her a small talisman, a stone carved with protective runes. "Keep this close, it'll shield you but not for long." Sarah clutched the stone, its warmth a faint comfort against the growing dread. The next day, Sarah contacted a local journalist, Emily, who agreed to publish the story. As they met in a diner, the air grew heavy, and Emily's coffee cup shattered without warning. Sarah's heart raced. Martha's reach extended beyond the bank. Emily, undeterred, promised to run the story but warned Sarah to stay safe. "This town doesn't like its secrets exposed," she said. That night, Sarah's apartment became a battleground. Objects fell from shelves and the lights flickered wildly. Martha's voice whispered through the walls, promising pain. Sarah held the talisman, reciting the protective incantation, but the air grew colder, the shadows darker. A mirror cracked, reflecting Martha's twisted face instead of Sarah's own. Sarah knew time was running out. The bank's corruption had to be exposed, but Martha's spirit was relentless. She and Elliot planned a final confrontation, one that would either break the curse or destroy them. The bank's basement, where it all began, would be the stage for their last stand. As Sarah prepared, the talisman grew warm in her hand, its runes glowing faintly. She felt Martha's presence everywhere, a constant weight on her soul. The truth was her weapon, but it came with a cost, one she wasn't sure she could pay. Sarah and Elliot returned to the bank at midnight, the building shrouded in an unnatural fog. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the windows rattled as if struck by an unseen force. Armed with the talisman, the voodoo book, and the damning documents, Sarah felt both terrified and resolute. This was their last chance to end Martha's curse. In the basement, they set up a larger salt circle, reinforced with herbs and protective runes. Elliot's hands moved swiftly, his chant steady despite the growing chill. Sarah placed the ledger and documents in the circle's center, an offering to expose the bank's sins. The air crackled with energy, the walls trembling as if the building itself were resisting. Martha's spirit appeared almost immediately, her form more solid, more terrifying than before. Her eyes burned with a sickly green light, and her voice shook the room. "You think truth will free you?" she roared. "You'll burn with this place." The salt circle flared, but the shadows surged forward, clawing at its edges. Elliot's chants grew louder, his voice a beacon in the chaos. Sarah joined him, reading from the voodoo book, her words trembling but firm. The circle glowed brighter, pushing back the shadows, but Martha's laughter filled the air, sharp and cruel. The documents began to smolder, their edges curling as if kissed by invisible flames. Sarah's talisman burned hot in her hand, its runes pulsing. She felt Martha's curse pulling at her, draining her strength, but she refused to falter. "We know what the bank did to you," she shouted. "We'll make it right." Martha's scream was deafening, the shadows lashing out, knocking Elliot to the ground. Blood trickled from his temple, but he kept chanting, his voice unwavering. The basement shook violently, crates toppling and pipes bursting. Water pooled on the floor, mixing with the salt, weakening the circle. Sarah's vision blurred, her body heavy, but she clung to the ritual, her voice rising above the chaos. The documents glowed, their words lifting into the air like embers, exposing the bank's crimes to the unseen. Martha's form flickered, her screams turning to wails of anguish. The circle's light intensified, enveloping her in a blinding glow. Sarah felt a surge of energy as if the truth itself were fighting back. She shouted the final incantation, her voice raw, and the documents burst into flames, their ashes swirling into the air. The shadows retreated and Martha's form began to dissolve, her eyes locked on Sarah's. "This isn't over," she whispered, her voice fading. The circle exploded in light, and a deafening silence followed. The basement was still, the air warm, the oppressive weight gone. Sarah collapsed, exhausted but alive. Elliot helped her up, his face bruised but relieved. "You did it," he said. "The curse is broken." Sarah nodded, but Martha's final words echoed in her mind. The bank felt different, lighter, but a faint chill lingered, a reminder of the power they'd faced. The next day, Emily's article hit the presses, exposing the bank's corruption. The town reeled and the bank's management faced investigations. Sarah's co-workers, freed from the curse's grip, thanked her quietly, their eyes still wary. The bank's operations continued, but its reputation was shattered, its secrets laid bare. Sarah left Briarwood soon after, seeking peace away from the bank's haunted walls. She kept the talisman, its runes now dull, a reminder of her survival. Elliot disappeared, leaving only a note. The spirits never truly leave. Sarah wondered if he was right, if Martha's presence still lingered in some unseen corner. Years later, standing in a new city, Sarah sometimes felt a chill, a whisper of Martha's voice in the wind. The curse was gone, but its scars remained, etched into her soul. Briarwood Bank stood as a warning, a place where greed had awakened a darkness that nearly consumed them all. If you love this chilling tale, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss our dark, spine-tingling horror stories from every corner of the globe.